I don't think it's going to be in the same URL. Let's see what happens.
Okay.
We could always just have a chat anyway.
Yeah,
Okay,
we're live.
It says live on both of them.
It says live in the top corner of mine.
Yeah, we are live now, but it's different URL.
Let me just put the URL in the other one then.
Let me just. I just copied that URL and sent to everyone.
Okay. I've just put it in the comments as well.
Cool. So we can start.
Well, apologies about the technical delay there.
Yeah, sorry about the URL problem as well. We try and sort out how to make that work with the custom URLs.
Yeah, every day's a school day.
Yeah, it's just a learning curve at the moment. But first of all, we want to thank Mike from Man's vs. Machine to accept the challenge to talk to me and James.
Challenge. Constant challenge.
We're gonna start quickly showing one piece from Man's vs. Machine, and then we start talking quickly with Mike. So just hold that. I'm gonna share my screen quickly. Yeah. So. So this is one of your latest pieces, yeah?
It is, yeah. That's a spot for Squarespace. What was that? I lost you there, James.
We should have got Squarespace to sponsor us, and it would have linked right in.
Yeah, you must be the only thing they're not sponsoring. But yeah, no, that was one spot from a campaign we did a few spots for a few years ago, and we kind of picked it up with them again. But yeah, it was great, just to sort of delving into the minds of the Squarespace makers. So she was a real sort of customer, the Ash, and we shot their sort of like inner mind sort of thing, and did that in CG. But it was good, really, really nice to just sort of really dial in on the flowers as a kind of super bloom element and develop it. So yeah, we enjoyed that one a lot.
Looks really nice.
We need to find out what everyone's drinking. We've skipped a step.
Okay, what are you drinking today, James?
I'm keeping it local again. I'm keeping it Black Sheep Ale from Mazan in Yorkshire. It's pretty good. What about you guys?
What are you drinking, Mike?
Aperol Spritz. It's only like 12 in the afternoon here, so.
Yes, there's no issue. It's always 12 o'clock somewhere. It's all fine.
Yeah,
nice,
I'm just having a glass of wine today. Easy.
Nice. How special.
Cool. Is it from a box or a bottle?
From a bottle.
I like the boxes.
You look like a box wine kind of guy.
Yeah, I am.
All right, let's dive into the first part, because obviously everyone's affected by coronavirus, which, well, not hoping everyone's not infected, but so obviously part of the reason why we're doing these live streams is because we can't have our Sin Weevil show. So firstly, have you guys been affected much by this whole coronavirus and how it's affected your business and kind of that side of things?
Yeah, for sure. It's we consider ourselves pretty sort of recession proof in general, because we choose to stay small and nimble. We can react to situations, and we've generally got a bit of an operating buffer, and it's the same in this case. But this has been a challenge for sure. But we've not had to do anything drastic or let anyone go or anything. But it's definitely it was just kind of, it happened all at once, didn't it? Where jobs that were sort of about to happen or about to award just suddenly went quiet, and it all happened at once. So you're used to those things happening in general, but usually they're spread over the course of the year rather than just all happening on especially, like 1 week of
especially when it's worldwide as well. Like normally it's relatively regional. As one region pops up kind of thing. But this is just worldwide.
Yeah. So I think we're similar to most people, but we're really lucky that we're in that sort of the making end of the business. So we're needed basically, especially being CG sort of focused as well. CG animation, we're very lucky, because it's going to be weird, because it's the sort of the recession that follows this is going to be a weird one, because it's all over the world, but there's certain people who will be thriving at the same time just because of the look of the industry they work in. Like, I've got a really random one. I've got a mate in the UK who imports dartboards from China. He's never had a better month in his business. It's a really random one, but it's like I won't say he's loving it, but it's never been better for him selling dartboards.
I have noticed walking around locally that there's way more alcohol in people's recycling bins. So people are drinking a lot more, as a weird example. But you mentioned you guys did have a couple of challenges. What kind of challenges have you guys faced then?
It's just that slight feeling of insecurity where you're no longer sort of in control to a degree. Usually we feel, or I feel at least, relatively in control of the situation. I've got a strong read on how firm a job is or an inquiry is, or if we're pitching on something, I generally feel like you've got a good gauge on it even before the clients let you know whether you've won it or not. You can kind of gauge it and get a feel for it. But like when this hit, it was like, oh. so the jobs that we have had awarded since it happened have just felt that bit more sort of reassuring and that bit bigger than they normally do, I suppose, because you're like, oh, phew, because more are not landing than landing in this moment. So
have any of them adjusted their budgets at all? Because my wife had a project recently where it was before Corona, it was one budget, then she put together a tender, and then they awarded the job, but then they put the budget down. Have you had anything like that? Like protections?
I don't think so. I don't think so. Anything has changed halfway through now. But I think there are people trying to sort of, I don't know, it's easy to sort of point fingers and say people are trying to lowball based on the people's need for work, but that's not happened to us. But again, it's a bigger kind of topic, but I think a key issue of having a strong studio is knowing your own value. So you've just got to stick to that basically, and that's something that I think we're really good at is knowing our value and declining things if they don't meet our value.
Yeah, true.
So because you guys have the studio in US and UK as well, do you see any difference between both, or if feeling everywhere is the same situation at the moment?
I don't. It's hard to say. Not strictly, but both studios are that we don't really work on the same jobs that often. We'll specific tasks on jobs will be shared, because there might be someone in LA who's like the best procedural person ever, who's like, it makes more sense for that person to pick up a small percentage of a London project, and vice versa. But we don't really kind of share jobs on the whole. So each studio has often got a different kind of like flow anyway. So it's hard to say, but I'd say the US has sort of reacted more strongly to it. The US market has.
Maybe because it's bigger as well, no?
Yeah, I think so. And I think more money gets spent out here. So I think the decisions are therefore bigger kind of thing. So it's, but I'm probably reading between the lines there. but it feels. I'm based in LA, in case that wasn't obvious, and it's weird being here because you've got daily entertainment from our leader, and it's all quite surreal. It's still quite surreal to me, to be perfectly honest. So I'm not sure I'm sort of fully tuned into what's going on yet.
So how do you see like the creative industry changing post Corona? Like what's the new creative landscape look like to you? Would you say just more remote work? I'd imagine less physical studios.
Possibly, but not for me. I mean, I was chatting to a few of the guys on Slack yesterday in the studio and just like basically telling each other how much we miss each other. So I can't wait to get back to the studio. And that's, we're pretty old school at Man vs Machine in a way. We're very staff driven, like kind of we try and build a little family and thrive off each other. So for us, the remote thing we'd need to adapt our model if we were going to like go full remote. We'd have to rethink a lot of things. So I think we're definitely more open to working with other people remotely. But honestly, for me personally, I don't see it being a thing where it's like, oh, cool, let's make half our staff remote now. It's not. Mm-hmm. My head's not there.
Yeah, I think it's nice to have a core team, but then you could still, I guess, you'd have a core team, but then be open to more remote work or whatever the situation entails.
Yeah, I think we'll be when we come out of this, we'll be much more comfortable working remotely with people because in all honesty, we prefer the kind of like
everyone in house.
The shorthand and everyone just being there and the unspoken stuff that happens. I love that. I love all that stuff personally. Again, and but there are massive perks to it. Like there are some people who work for us who are quite vocal about being more productive in the afternoon and evenings than in the mornings, and this allows them to sort of pick their own hours as long as they're fulfilling their end of whatever the job they're doing. Yeah. So I think it'll be interesting for sure, and it will adjust how we go about things, but I don't know if it'll be as much of a change, paradigm shift, everything's different tomorrow sort of thing as people might like to think.
I think it'll open up a few people to doing remote work, because before Corona hit, sometimes it was really difficult to get studios to kind of buy into the idea that actually, as long as you've got a good reputation, it's okay to work remote kind of thing. But I do appreciate that having someone on site is always better, just to get that immediate feedback, bounce back ideas.
Yeah, and that's purely my opinion. I'm just really into people. It's like I love the dynamic with human beings and just having as much fun as possible and fitting the work in around the nonsense. That's we've worked together, James. You know that. So
I don't know what
I'm not a very
That's why you moved to LA.
To get away from you. Do you remember when we interviewed you, me and Adam, in that bar?
Yeah, I do, with Marcus.
The mainframe.
Back in the day.
We were like, when was that? Like that was when I was working at Mainframe.
2006.
And around 2006, and we interviewed this youngster from up north in a bar over the road from the studio, and we were all like, what do you make of him?
No chance. Maybe no one else applied. I don't know. Whatever.
It was memorable. You got the job because you were memorable in the end.
Yes.
Sorry, couldn't help it.
What did you talk about, James? I can't imagine.
I'm sure it was very deep and meaningful conversation.
It was.
Was or about mums or cocks?
Yeah, that's what it was.
Wow. His main topic is, I think he's moved on from that, but it used to be a disease.
One quick question on regards, like you guys work remotely now, because you guys really heavy 3D guys, and of course, the way to work when you work with a team in-house with the server, with render farms and everything, as soon as you shift everyone working remotely, how that is affecting the work for you guys?
Yeah, that's the big one. because there's a certain amount you can do like over VPN and stuff like that. But when data sort of sizes start getting large, there needs to be someone on hand to go and manage that basically at the source. So yeah, that's something we're just embarking on a big project right now in LA. And yeah, we're working that out. I was on a call right before this where we're talking about that. Like, so how many people might have to actually be in the studio, you know, to make sure that we're covered. So it's, yeah, that's a reality. You know, we're not as good as the cloud is and all that. It's when the file sizes we generate are ridiculous, mostly because we're just obsessed with quality. So no one optimizes anything. But yeah, so that's a consideration, and that's I think it's easy to say, yeah, let's work remote. Let's reduce our overhead. Let's do this. Let's do that. But I think the reality might be something a little different to that.
Yeah. How many people you guys are in LA and UK now?
We are about 45 all in, 25-ish in London and 15-ish in LA.
Oh, cool. Yeah, it's quite a big team to manage, all working remotely as well.
Yeah, we're fine. It's been good actually, because you find yourself splitting into kind of manageable little teams a little bit more. So not everyone needs to know everything that's going on, which is good short term because it allows people to focus. But I think long term, that's one of the strengths of being part of such a close-knit company as Man vs Machine, is that you do get to see everything that's happening. We're very transparent with all the information, things that come in, things that are going, things that we decide not to do. Everyone could, just by overhearing conversations, you can get a beat on what the vibe is. So I guess that's completely gone with the remote thing.
How did, in kind of similar things when you're talking about from a London office and LA office, how was it going from London to LA? Like, is it a similar vibe in both offices? Is it quite consistent? Or is it a bit more California laid back?
It's I massively underestimated the challenge of jumping over to LA. You know, it's such a different culture. And you just think, I don't know if it's just me or in general, we just think because Americans speak English and we've seen it on TV, we think we understand the culture, but it's just totally different. And it took me along, like just personally, the family, you know, to settle properly. It's just different, you know, when you're trying to get bank accounts and all that stuff, you're like, oh shit. You realize that you're in a totally different continent at the furthest point of that different continent. And it's totally different. And it's the same in the creative culture. It's just very, very different. Like way more different than you think. And that's why I'm so, I was just gonna say, that's why I'm like extra proud of where we're at. We're almost 4 years old with the LA studio, and I'm really proud of it because it's a big one, you know. There's a lot of hurdles that you just didn't even know existed because you've done it once in London. You're like, it's going to be the same again, easy, and then you're like, oh man, didn't even know that hurdle was a hurdle.
What's been the biggest challenge that you wish you'd have known before setting up the LA studio? Or the biggest cultural difference as well? Actually, that's kind of interesting.
I mean, that's the thing. It's not like, oh, okay, so here's 1, 2, and 3. As long as you know them, you're good. It's just every single thing you do every single day, whether it's in work or out of work, is like 15% different or something like that. So they're not like perceivable things that are like glaring and you're like, okay, let's plan for that, and that. It's everything. So it just accumulates and accrues and you're like, shit. Why do I not feel like I've got a full grasp of this yet? And you know, that's like 6 months in. So it's taken us a few sort of like cycles to get to a really good place in LA, and that's just the honest truth. But we're really proud of what we've got.
I always find humor quite a big one, a big gap between a lot of American and England. I mean, not just my own brand, but UK as in general.
They didn't understand you.
Well, luckily, my humor's slightly better than yours. But,
well, I mean,
no, that's a big one. That's a huge one. If the amount, like, I just don't take myself seriously ever, and it's to the point where actually I probably should sometimes. And but that doesn't really translate here. You know, the whole sort of self-depreciating thing. It is with some people, but generally it's not a thing. And it's weird that the things I struggle with a little bit are the things that make me really enjoy being here, because I love that everyone's like positive in California and they've got that kind of sunny disposition, and that's why I live here, because I love the climate and I love the.
Sometimes you want the truth, though.
Yeah, but it's weird. The things I struggle with are the things I enjoy the most in other people. So it's like it's a weird one, but it's brilliant. I love living here.
Do you feel the culture, like you said, you guys been there for 4 years now? Do you feel like the way you go and pitch to clients? Did you feel you need to adapt when you move? Like,
yes,
we're talking about
probably.
joking, the humor, but so you lose a little bit of the way you pitch as well, because you lose the way, I would say, the way you are, because you lose a little bit of the character, because you need to pitch in a different way, or people would jokes you do on the pitch.
I didn't think that would be a thing, but it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
But the weird thing is, like, 60% of our work came from the West Coast of the States before we had a West Coast US office when we were in London. So that's why we thought there's absolutely no difference. It's the same sorts of people doing the same work, but somehow it is different. And I wish I could tell you like exactly what and why. And we've learned specific things, but that's one of them, Tiago. Yeah. Is being too jokey is not a positive here with certain clients. Once you've worked with like Squarespace, for example, like beyond informal with them.
Yeah.
But
I guess you feel it out.
But once you've until you've got a gauge on someone, you've got to assume a very professional position here. Yeah. I think people take their jobs a lot more seriously out here. Like your profession defines you a lot more in America than it does in Europe.
Yeah, because that's just something. I don't know. I've been living here for 17 years now. I studied studio here, but we opened last year in Brazil, and for me, even to just the process of working as well, process to pitch and to talk to the client, it's changed completely the way we normally do, and it's kind of hard to find the personality back. How you do and be yourself as well. I think for me, it's because it's quite a new thing for us. I just feel it's really weird in the beginning. You need to kind of learn to be yourself again in a different way.
Yeah, and I've kind of enjoyed that because I've been going so long now. It's like 14 years, Man vs. Machine, and it's kind of nice to have a reason to try and reinvent certain things you do, and that's why LA's been challenging for sure, and again we're really well established now, and it's great, and we're really proud of it. But I've had to adapt my role basically, look, in hindsight, of course I had to. I was going to a different country, a different continent, a different planet, but I didn't even think about that beforehand. I thought I could just bowl out and be like, yay, carry on. But it's been, in hindsight, it's been good, because what I've actually done, like I started Man vs. Machine with Tim, who's we were both just designers, directors type people at the start, and we didn't have a producer for about 4 or 5 years. We just answered the phone and did everything ourselves, managed, produced jobs ourselves, had a couple of people like helping us with the technical 3D stuff. And but Tim, once we started like to get a bit more serious, we decided to sort of like divvy up the responsibilities. So who was going to be the sort of make the calls on the business stuff, and who was going to make the calls on the creative stuff. So I went creative, Tim went business, but we were still crossing over a lot. And so I was always pretty protected and shielded by Tim from the actual business side of it. Mm-hmm. I never really had to worry about anything, or he just had it covered, and I trusted him implicitly. And but since I moved to LA, even though we've got a great MD and all that kind of stuff, as you're the only founder in the room, you're going to be constantly brought into the conversation. So that's something I've had to learn, is now I understand how the business runs, nuts and bolts, and I didn't before. So in hindsight, it's wicked, but I've had to learn it.
Yeah.
Adam says 14 years is nothing.
Yeah.
Adam.
Yeah.
Adam Rowe. Who's Adam? Who?
Adam Jens. Frame.
Oh, Adam Jens. Oh God, of course, yeah. I mean, Adam is the godfather of motion design in London. It's like There's not many people he's not touched.
Oh, wait there, that's liable.
I mean, in a professional capacity.
Okay, so there's a question on YouTube here from Leia Lemonade. It says, it kind of links into one of our other questions. So it says, what's the best advice you can give a newcomer in the creative field? But it kind of links into one of our other questions, which is, what do you look for when, what do you look for in like a freelancer or staff?
If someone's already kind of professional, so they've done the whole learning part already, I mean, you're always learning, but honestly, and again, this has changed. I've adapted so much. I used to be, the work was everything, and it didn't matter if you were a dick or you were a nice person. If you were good at your job, that's all that mattered. Talent was more important than anything. But, you know, as you get longer in the tooth, you just want to hang out with really good people. And so you just have no time for dickheads and people who are self-serving, especially with a business like ours where we are this kind of, we don't, you know, whether I direct something or someone else in the studio does, we don't give ourselves the credit for it. Man versus machine is the creator, the designer, the director, the creator of that job. And that's how we do it, because we believe that everyone is an equal contributor to the project. So
it's similar to what Orion from Buck was saying last week. You know, it's not about egos. It's about friends hanging out and making good work.
Yeah, I mean, you need strong minds in there for sure. The people do look to for answers, that's really important. So you need healthy egos, the people who are like, but that ego has to be like based on what's best for the studio, not what's best for 18 months down the line. And
yeah,
so in truth, it's a really boring word, but I think I look at how people who apply themselves well are my favorite people. So it's not about like, obviously you've got to be at a certain level you've got to come in and be useful every day off the bat. That should be a given. But if you apply yourself as a well-rounded human being and get shit done, and don't whinge when feedback comes in, because that's what we get paid for. We get paid to deal with feedback. That's our jobs as designers. And it's like, so just like, it's really boring, but application is probably my number one quality in a candidate, is like, and you don't really know that until you've worked with them. So that's why we generally mostly base hires on recommendations and stuff like that.
Yeah, cuts out a lot of risk.
It's not very glamorous, but application and well-rounded human beings is what we look for.
So to boil it down, it's basically nipple tassels. All right.
Who are nah.
Yeah, I think you said a really good phrase that I've used quite a lot when I talk to students as well, because I think, I don't know if we're getting too old, but I think the new generation, a lot of people get, you know, like the syndrome of the artist. You know, they think, ooh, you know, as soon as the client complain or give some feedback, and they feel so personal nowadays, you know, they understand that's a work, you're getting paid to do that, you know, and it's not personal, it's about the job. And it's something I've been living like for a few years, and it's just going over and over and over. And I feel quite a lot on the young people. They just feel so annoyed by comments, feedback, you know, feels so personal.
Yeah, and that's weakness, man. That's people showing their weakness, if you ask me. Like the real strong ones are the ones who just take it on board, process it, and come up with a solution. And there's I have, like, you know, you can't, like, judging, for example, as a theme. Like, people who say I don't judge, I mean, that's bullshit. Judging is like one of the biggest assets you can have as an owner of a company, but also as a designer, because we're constantly judging every situation and every person in the room to work out what's the most efficient way to get this shit done. So I think judging is an underestimated skill, and I think I'm quite good at it.
Well, we'll be the judge of that. There's a quick question in YouTube. We don't want to get too technical because it can be quite dry, but they're asking, Mark Phillips is asking...
You're speaking to the wrong person.
Well, that's why I want to boil it down to something simple. It's quite a quick one. It says, how did you make the Squarespace flowers? Was it Houdini or Cinema 4D?
It was Houdini, but Houdini and Cinema are our main tools, and we love the way they dovetail because they're both like really good at very different things. So finally, we've got this thing that's not just an opinion-based thing where, you know, someone prefers this, someone prefers that, but there's no actual objective argument. It's just an opinion kind of thing. But with Cinema and Houdini, they are just like coming at it from such different angles that there's a natural sort of handoff point. But so we do a lot in Cinema still, a lot. But obviously, Houdini can take things to a different level of kind of complexity. So yeah, that the sort of super bloom, as we call it, the flower sculpture that grows around it. Yeah, that was in Houdini, and it was fully sort of like scripted.
What do you guys think of like Blender, like the free packages? Because they seem to be gaining more and more traction. But most people I know use Cinema for it. I don't know if there's any cross you can use them between each other. I'm not sure.
I mean, I'm not hands-on with the 3D, but I do, you know, I hear people semi-joking about it in the studio, like, we'll all be using Blender one day, and it's like, maybe.
It's a very capable package from what I've seen.
Yeah, so, yeah, I mean, 3D, I was about to say, like, you know, 3D is not all we do, but it's a lot of what we do, so there's no point saying that. We love it.
Actually, I had a question I was thinking earlier. Like, so you guys are kind of known for your kind of 3D, somewhat abstract 3D in a way. But recently you've been doing. I know it's. But that's my next. You've been doing a bit more kind of character design, character animation, like the KFC project and the iBuy Direct project, for examples. Are you guys going to get more into characters? Because I know when you were back in London a while ago, you know, there's. Like, you know, you were working with like Chris Sayer, who's predominantly character based. Is that something that Man vs Machine wants to look into?
No, not. It just depends on the skill set you've got in house. So what happened there was we did the KFC job, and that was a fun one because we worked with Mother in London quite a bit, and they had that script, and we weren't a natural candidate for that job at the time, but we were on the pitch list, so we were like, all right, challenge accepted. And so we sort of worked out a way to do it, and we brought in a guy called Tom Bunker, who is a animator, to help us with that because we didn't have any sort of 2D animators in house, and we just loved Tom so much that after that job was finished, we needed to find a way for him to stay because he's just a great guy and a great asset to the team. So that's how it evolved. It's not that we're now strategically looking to move into that environment. It's just like, oh, we've got that string to our bow now because we just found this guy who we loved, and he can cover that stuff for us. So it's quite organic.
Yeah, it's nice when it works out. So when I saw the KFC project, like it's really well done, really nicely done, but it didn't jump out as a Man vs Machine project initially, so you kind of look into it more. It's such a different style from what we used to.
Yeah, and that's the sort of like the challenge I try and lay down to the team every year is like, if 1 in 4 jobs that we do surprise people in some way, then that's really healthy. Because, you know, the obvious thing that people come to us with is like, hey, can you do us a Man vs Machine on cheese? And that's great. It's like the best brief and the worst brief at the same time, because it's great because you're like, wow, they're coming to us as the go-to people for this thing. So that's cool. But then you're like, it's up to you to try and reinvent your own style a little bit every time. So it's kind of easier to be a little bit lazy with those briefs. But when you've got something that's just out of your comfort zone, obviously you do your best. And that's quite, you know, we know we're pretty good at the whole sort of tactile 3D sort of thing. So it's almost like, it's always a challenge, but you can sort of, you have to kind of wake yourself up every now and again and not go into autopilot. Whereas with something that's a bit more off the wall, it definitely freshens everyone up a little bit.
It also kind of opens up more creative avenues as well. So, you know, maybe you can combine like 2D animation with tactile 3D in quite a unique way later on.
Exactly, yeah. Exactly. And that's honestly that we're just like a visual communication company. We don't care what the medium is or the brief is. Naturally, we predominantly work in the world we work in, which is kind of ads and sort of motion branding, but we're not against anything. If someone comes to us with a brief, we'll give it a go if we're excited about it, and we'll teach ourselves what we need to learn for that brief.
What if it's the Sun? If they come for you for an ad?
Page 3.
Because I guess some people don't realise that he's from St Helens, which is near Liverpool, which they banned the Sun after the Hillsborough disaster. So there you go.
I've got
still to this day.
Still to this day, rightly so.
I've got a really good question, not a question, but subject I would like to bring on and see if you want to talk to us a little bit more, because looking from the business side as well, Men's Versus Machine is a really well-known studio, and years ago you guys being part of Landor as well. So this is something like, I think people never think about selling part of the business or selling the business as a motion graphic studio, and it's quite not a normal thing to think as a business, especially studio wise. You know, people normally don't think. I know Tim has really this business mentality, you know, focus on that. What I want to ask you is something you guys always thought about, or you guys build on that, or just if you can tell us a little bit, you know, your point of view of selling a studio and telling us a little bit of the story, so people, you know, never heard about these things, you know, they can see it's possible as well.
Yeah. So yeah, we sold a proportion of the business to. We're now part of the Landor and Fitch group, which is part of WPP. That's the bigger conglomerate. And it came about. It wasn't something we planned from the start. You know, it was something where we realized it was kind of a logistics thing where I don't know, how old were we at that point? I guess we were probably about 8 years old, maybe 9 years old. And we were like, it was that decision of like, how do we take this to the next level? Or are Tim and I willing to invest personally in taking this to the next level? It's all our risk. And what do we do when we get to like, because I think we were probably at sort of, I don't know, 15 people maybe or so at that time. And it was a case of like, we didn't have any HR, no one had a pension, there was nothing like that. We were just a bunch of dweebs in a room turning up every day. And people did start asking us like, so I had a pension in my last job, can I get one here? And we're like, yeah, we'll sort that, we'll come back to you on that. And so we realized that we had to implement certain things, and we figured that an easy way of doing that might be to partner up with someone instead of we just couldn't imagine a world where we'd have like accounts people or HR people in our room with us. It just didn't make sense to us. So what made more sense was sort of having that as an external resource, and so you can do that, but we weren't big enough to justify the cost ourselves. So that's where the idea started, is that what if we partner up with a bigger company, and then we get all those serious business things rolled in, and we still operate as we did back then. On the back end, it's a little bit more, there's a bit more heavy lifting to do for our sort of like leadership, the MDs and that kind of stuff, because they have to sort of meet certain requirements. But I'm glad you asked, actually, Thiago, because it's been brilliant. And all you ever hear, like when we were approached by that group about the acquisition, you know, all you ever hear is bad stories about acquisitions. You like, oh, they take away your freedom, blah blah blah. And
yeah, that's what we heard.
And that's all we heard. But it's been good. It's been really good, and it's allowed us to, like the LA studio would have been a nightmare as an independent, because, so like I said, there's so much you don't even know that you don't know. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's not that you just don't know it. You don't even know that you don't know that you know. It's like,
it's good to have the infrastructure for multinational.
Oh, it's brilliant, and it's really, it's been great for us. I'm glad you asked, because I think it's important that people do hear that those things can go well. As long as you agree the principles in the deal up front, it's not like, you know, the financial side of it is a pretty sort of straightforward part of agreeing a deal like that. But the day-to-day principles of the running of the business, that's what took the time for us, is to come to an agreement on how we'd run day to day. It wasn't an enjoyable experience, but it was like a real eye-opening experience, because you're suddenly in a room with these super execs, and you can sponge so much from these people. You know, like back to your point earlier, Tiago, where in certain rooms now, I do act a different way than I will with my friends, whereas I used to just act the same in work as I do with my friends. But now, if I'm pitching to certain clients, I will sort of be more professional. But it was just so nice to spend time, and we still do sort of constantly communicate with these captains of industry, if you like, kind of thing, who are the CEOs of these huge companies. And I love spending time with them, because you realize how they've got to that level, because they're masters of like communication and controlling the room and stuff. I find it so fascinating. So yeah,
Catalina wine mixer.
We went to Catalina for our studio retreat. It was brilliant.
Actually, I was just thinking, like with so you say the company approached Man versus Machine. Was it just a coincidence that you guys were looking to potentially sell at a similar time? Was it just, you know, the stars aligning, or did you kind of put a bit of a word out that you were thinking about it?
Yeah, no, it was just it was while we were sort of starting to have discussions about it, we realised that there were potentially people who might be interested in that kind of thing. But it's coincidence. But so we, you know, I think Ryan mentioned it when you spoke to him. There's so much luck involved in this shit. So much luck. And it's just like for me, the luck of meeting Tim. Like, we started Man vs. Machine not knowing each other that well, but he used to run my favorite studio, which was Precursor. And they disbanded one day, and we started out of, you know, the day after they disbanded, Tim and I started Man vs. Machine. So, you know, how lucky is that for me to start a business with the guy who was one of my favorite studios? So there's so much luck involved. And it was just, I mean, yeah, and that's where, like, I never would have thought that we'd have been worth anything to anyone, because my mind doesn't work that way. But Tim could see the value, and he could. So, yeah.
After you
on the creative side, you know, just so people can understand a little bit, because of course having let's say a partner, you know, like the company end up being a partner with you guys, does affect the way you guys do business as a creative? Because I think for most of the people looking from outside, Man vs. Machine always stays the same as Man vs. Machine, never change anything for people looking. A part of the bottom on the website saying you're part of the group. But does affect anything on, let's say, on the way you guys work on the creative side? Do you guys need to give feedback on that, or is more like the business side?
Yeah, it changes the business side quite a lot, because there's being part of a larger group. I mean, it's getting quite boring now, but there's all sorts of compliances you need to meet, because you're part of this huge, WPPs on the stock market. So we have to meet the business standards of any business that's on the stock market. So there's a lot of back end admin to do. It's basically a full-time job for somebody just to do all the unseen stuff. Now, for each studio, that's a full-time job for someone. But that's fine, because that's unseen. It doesn't affect what's happening in the room. So creatively, no, not one bit. But business-wise, yes. But there were probably some things we should have buttoned up with our business anyway. So you know, it's good to be sort of based on instinct, which we were, and we always have been. But you know, we ran probably a little too much on instinct for it to be a kind of a thing that could have been. Like, there's no succession plan in place before, whereas now there's a succession plan. Man vs. Machine will live forever. So, or as long as it wants to live for. So, whereas when it was just at the whim of me and Tim, if we'd have decided one day, I can't be bothered anymore, then this company closes. Now it doesn't. So
yeah, it's kind of interesting, because, you know, a lot of creative companies are basically the owner's personality. So, you know, if they leave, if they get bought out by someone and they leave, the company ceases to be what it was anyway. So it's
I think that's what makes really hard as well, to kind of think to sell a motion design animation studio. You know,
they're usually hard to sell because of that reason.
Yeah, it's in the end of the day, it's you and team. You know, as soon as you two leave, you know, it's no man's machine. You know.
Yeah, and that's just not true, basically. But it may have been at the time, because there's people who work way harder than I work in our studio and do way more, and it's just true. It's like, that's why we're a collective model, and that's all the value is not with one individual. Yeah. And but some people do put themselves at the forefront, and I guess I am the most public facing person in the company, but I'm by no means the most prolific person in the studio, because I'm a bit of a jack of all trades these days, you know, where I'll be directing 1 minute and then I'll be sort of in meetings the next minute and then discussing people's sort of appraisals the next minute. So it's
okay.
It's not I don't think it's a thing, and I think it's easy to undervalue yourself, basically, and that's why I'm really proud of the journey we've been on, because we've stuck to what we consider our value to be on a day-to-day basis, and it's worked out quite well.
Let's take it back to the creative side. So what are your favorite types of clients, and like who? Well, I guess I'm kind of interested in what kind of client wouldn't you work with as well? It works out that way.
I wouldn't say there's anyone really. If there's a kind of contentious issue, like an alcohol brand or something, we'll always ask the studio if anyone's uncomfortable working on that, and if someone is, then we don't make them work on it. But generally, we've been doing it a while now, and we've been lucky enough to sort of do all the stuff with Nike and the Channel 4 stuff with the Dream Jobs, and the Squarespace stuff's pretty cool. So it's good to work with cool clients, but doing cool stuff for uncool clients is way cooler. Like the cheese job, Castello cheese. I love that project.
I guess sometimes there's like passion projects that don't make sense. Like, oh, cheese, man, I love that cheese.
Just brilliant.
But that brings, like, if you don't have, like, let's say a favorite person you want to work, that makes me think as well, what about personal projects? It's been quite a while you guys don't push you guys to the limit on the personal project. Is anything you guys cooking, or there is any you guys doing a long format or game stuff? Anything we could?
No, not right now. About? Like, no, we're quite focused on the short form thing, because we like it. I get nervous if anything's more than 90 seconds long, because we've built a reputation based on craft, where we do craft the life out of every pixel kind of thing. And so we've therefore built a team of people who thrive at doing that. So we're not that way inclined. If someone comes to us with a long form project and they pinpoint us as the people to do it, by all means, or an AI project, or not VR. I fucking hate VR. Bullshit. But,
sorry, Marcus.
Sorry. But if someone comes to us, we'll be all ears. We'll be like, okay, interesting that you've pinpointed us as the company to do that. So it's not like we have a rule that we're not going to do stuff, but we just prefer to focus on what we're good at. Again, we're pretty old school. We're pretty common sense. What are we good at? Let's do that. And so we're focused on being the best in the world at what we're good at. And I'm not saying we are, but we're focused on being there.
It's interesting that you're not particularly interested in VR when you look at some of the stuff like Arbor Analog are doing. I'd have thought that would have been right up Man versus Machine Alley kind of thing.
It probably is some of the people, just not me personally. So obviously I can't speak for everyone in the company, but I know that I thought VR was embarrassing the day it launched, standing around in a room with some giant plastic goggles on your noggin. It's just
but I also remember you in the studio wearing a medallion saying 2D. So what?
Yeah, I did do that actually. I was so anti 3D, wasn't it? In the mainframe days, I was so anti 3D. I had a medallion that said 2D.
If you could see yourself now.
I know. Well, let's go with the monies, mate. No, it's true. So you never say never, but no, Tiago, we've not got anything bubbling away, but we are looking at ways of achieving. We were lucky that we went through a phase of working with clients who gave us a lot of creative freedom and trusted us implicitly. Like the Film 4 job was probably the best job I'll ever work on. I loved it so much. And Dan Chase, who was the client at Channel 4, he's a good director in his own right, but he just gave us the reins, and because he knew that was the best way to deal with it. And we, and surprise, surprise, the jobs where the clients give you full control, and they obviously they're giving you feedback and you're meeting criteria all the time, but they give you the reins to do your job properly. Surprise, surprise, that's the one that wins the Black Pencils and the Gold Lions. There's definitely a correlation between good client relationships and awards. And to that point, I think awards are really important. And I never used to. Again, this was something I've gone full circle on, because before we won any, I was like, bullshit.
Fucking Michael flip-flop Alderson.
But what you see, like when we were just winning back-to-back Gold Lions and yellow pencils and then the black pencil and all that, you should see the difference it has in the confidence in the room, in the studio. True. After we've been awarded that, everyone, it's like acknowledgement for everyone in the studio that, yeah, we're quite good at this, aren't we? So when the next brief drops in, people push further. They're like, okay, let's take it to the next level. So they're not really important in that you can't live without them, but they're a really nice confidence boost for the studio as a whole. And we've noticed that. So that's just an observation that I've made. So I'm not saying that winning awards is the be all and end all, because it's not, but it does definitely have a positive effect on the sort of confidence and morale of every individual in the studio when you do win a big one.
Have you found it also brings in more projects as well?
I can't say that we've noticed that, but again, we're pretty low volume. We're small in the scheme of things, so we can't do that a huge amount of jobs at the same time. We tend to like really curate as much as we can, so we've got the right combination of jobs going on at any given time, and they're dovetailing nicely together. But they don't do any harm, the awards, and they open you up to because motion design is such a niche thing.
Yeah, very.
If you do win some global awards, they suddenly open you up to people who never knew you existed. People who are at the Cannes Festival of Creativity, whatever you think of that. Suddenly they know you exist, and it's the truth is, whether you're working with an agency or a client, they all just want to work with someone who's really good at their job and ideally a bit famous. So that's why like the amazing directors, like all ad creatives want to work with, the feature film directors, even though they're probably not as good as ad directors at ads, just so they can tell the mates that they're working with that person. So we're aware of that, and we try to position Man vs. Machine to be this desirable entity. We try. I don't know if we achieve it, but we do try to. And I think the likes of Book do a really, really great job of that as well, where they're just this kind of desirable brand within themselves. And I think it's smart.
Yeah.
Good
question from Eduardo Scanho, and I think linked to another question we have about being on top of the game as well. Edu asked, how do you manage to be innovative, or what are the challenges? And I think it links to a question we like to ask as well about, you guys being on top of the game, how do you guys stay there, and, how do you guys feel to push there?
Oh, I mean, it's hard. and I think we're one of the top studios, and there's so many really good studios out there. It's amazing, but to stay up there, it's hard. Like doing it for long is, again, it doesn't sound as exciting as like being the hottest thing right now. But the people I've got massive respect for at this point are the Adam Jenses of the world at Mainframe. the people who've been doing it consistently for a really long time. It's the same as my application and well-rounded human comments. That is, doing it at a certain level for a long period of time is way harder than sort of, you know, burning out and fading away. So it's hard, it's tiring being sort of, especially now that I'm getting older and you're still kind of running a company that's based on being cool. When you're kind of pretty sure you're not that cool anymore. But so yeah, it's
for yourself.
But obviously the way you do it is by sort of recruiting people who are absolutely rad, and the blend of people in the room is the hardest part of running a studio. Like we're constantly seesawing between, like, we're too heavy on the creative side, and then we compensate, and then we get too heavy on the executional side, and then it swings back. And so you're always trying to find that balance, and it's so hard. And it's, you know, jokingly I refer to it as the Man versus Machine is the finest cocktail of nerds and hipsters in the world, and that's kind of what it is. You want the people who are just like introducing you to like new cultural references and new things, and then the people who are just doing shit where you see it over the shoulder and you're like, what is that? And they're like, well, don't worry about it, it's just a such and such. And you're like, you know, and then you look at what that person's doing and what that person's doing, and you're suddenly like, right.
The magic.
Yeah, and that's why
I didn't send a message that he loved you.
Ah. It's becoming a bit of a loving. I like most Adams. Adam's one of those words where you don't meet that many bad Adams, do you? I don't really know that many bad Adams.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Trying to think, but I can't think of a sarcastic comment, so it's a bit rubbish.
Speak from the heart.
I know that I had to move Adam on my phone list so that I didn't pocket call him. That was always a good move.
Yeah. But did I answer that question, Tiago? I can't work out whether they answered.
Yeah,
how do you stay innovative? Oh yeah. So it's about evolving the team, because my mind is probably no longer the freshest mind on the shop floor.
Do you think it's important that you guys always bring like fresh people, you know, like when you guys looking for new stuff as well, you know, looking for someone that has that different look, that could bring something different to the table, could try and push you guys a little bit further? Or is more like a collective in the studio, everyone trying to push each other?
We try and bring people in to add some new flavor, but what we find has happened in the past is that people will naturally try and fit into what our current style is. So you have to really encourage people to sort of like, no, you're not here to try and fit in with what we do. You're here to sort of add your flavor to what we do. But at the same time, it's not like do what you like. It's like, be aware of who the client is and what they're asking us to do, and be aware of who they've come to, but feel free to put a totally new twist on it. So it's, you can tell there's no point hiring someone who's a phenomenal, you know, sort of charming illustrator and then throwing them into a technical 3D job and expecting them to do that. It's more like, what can they bring to that? So and that's why teamwork is vital. Because
there was a question from the last one I thought was quite good that Thiago asked, where he said, have there ever been any projects where you've made like huge mistakes, however the mistakes actually worked out for the better? It's like, oh, that's interesting, that'll stay. And that's the way we work, because I don't even know how, I'm so blinkered at this point after just working at Man vs Machine for so long. I don't actually know how the studios work. So, but if a client asks us to, sometimes the clients will say, how do you want to switch the project? How do you like to work? And at that point, we ask for a lot more time in sort of design development and less time in execution. Right.
Because you're starting execution in design anyway, but certain aspects of any given project take longer to get to that stage. So we are just throwing shapes. That's how we work. We try not to overthink it and create two sort of defined roads that we're going down. We try and, trying to avoid cliches here, but it's more about building up building up walls for sort of our designers to knock down rather than telling them to go down that road.
But, we should probably wrap it up soon. There's one other question.
One more question, yeah.
Are you getting bored?
No,
I
it's
mean,
being an
we want
hour.
to carry on.
we
I need
can
to go
carry
get
on.
another beer.
No.
Yeah, it's finishing.
No, I'm offended.
I'll do one quick question, and then we'll pick one from, or Thiago, do you want to pick one from YouTube? But I was going to ask this again. I think Thiago asked it last time. Was what's the average day entail for Mike?
Yeah.
Getting
Like
woken
both
up
in the
really
morning,
early.
have a really nice lunch.
Built on by kids.
Yeah, I sometimes take the yacht out about 3 days a week. No, average day is, I mean, as I said, in my current sort of role, I'm a little bit of a jack of all trades, and we're working on sort of like giving me more time to be a sort of an outright creative mind again at the moment. But you know, it's a bit of everything. So any given day, I'm pretty much focused on the creative, and I oversee the creative across both studios. But another Adam Rowe in London is our ECD there, and he's autonomous. He doesn't need me, but you know, I like to stay relevant, so I have a chat to him every now and again.
Didn't you do that project, a collaborative project with Squares or something? Is that Adam Rowe? I'm sure it was. Anyway, sorry, I digress.
Well, years ago, I'm not sure. But anyway, so yeah, part of my gig is overseeing stuff, and part of my gig is I'm often running a job at any given time myself, kind of thing. So you're just jumping around a bit, and then there's the business itself where you have to have a few chats with people about sort of what's coming down the road and how we can best prepare for that, and you know, things we want to do proactively and things we want to do that because we can feel something on the horizon, a shift happening or something like that. But in general, I'm focused on the work, and you know, it doesn't really matter to me personally whether it's live action or CG or 2D branding. I still love it all. So it sounds idealistic and pretentious, but I honestly think a designer's background is the most valuable background you can have, because I am now like a director on set one day, and I'll be leading a traditional like brand identity project the next day. I'll be running a business the next day. And as a designer, you learn to sort of apply your mind to almost any problem. So I'm just really, again, lucky or thankful that I decided to go into design and not film school or not anything specific kind of thing.
Yeah, I was going to say nicking car wheels, but you know.
Yeah, I did that for a bit. It was all right. There's no future in it. No, I mean, we could talk for hours about. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of the traditional sort of creative schooling methods. I'm much more a fan of applied learning, because I didn't go to. I left school at 16 and went and worked in a glass factory as an engineer and learned what I didn't want to do before I learned what I did want to do. So when I did get to design, I really valued it. So I'm just a huge fan of applied learning. And I think if it's all just too sort of academic or hypothetical, if my kids show an interest down the road, if my kids show an interest in getting into a similar thing to what I do, I'll definitely steer them away from a traditional sort of college method and probably tell them to spend the money they would have spent.
Because I think the issue that we have at the moment is in education. The kids who come out of like design or these classes are generally not ready for the industry, even though they think they are. You know, kids will get like, sorry, not kids, but you know, people will get like a first from university and think they're like the bee's knees, but they're not ready for the industry. I think that's
and everyone. Yeah, and totally, and that's what Ravensbourne, where I finished off in London, they were really good at that. They were really good at. That was a tiny college, and it's so prolific how many people are actually running studios and stuff now from Ravensbourne.
Well, it's like Ravensbourne and RCA are kind of like too big in the kind of animation design industry. It's usually just those two, really. I can't think of many others where there's been a lot of nice, really good alumni.
Yeah. But yeah, and they made a point of preparing you for the world of work, and that was really refreshing. That's why I love them. But yeah, I've been and lectured at like CalArts here, which is an amazing place to go to college. You know, it's like if you've got an endless pot of money, then go and do a
if you got the
postgrad at CalArts. But if you actually just want to prepare yourself for work, then maybe don't.
Just do a couple of Vimeo tutorials and jobs are good in.
Yeah, don't get me started.
Or just start a YouTube channel like me and James.
Yeah.
But I think maybe before we wrap up, maybe it'd be nice to try and pick your brain and understand where do you see men's versus machine in 3-5 years? You know, what
5-10 years, bit further.
5-10 years, you're already 14 years, so let's think bigger.
Yeah.
What would you like to achieve?
Right now, I think we're just on this same sort of mission we've always had, is to sort of be the go-to studio for something, and currently that is. But when we got to a certain point with all the 3D stuff where we were really desperate to sort of add live action to our bow, and that was a journey, you know, because no one trusts you for a while. So that's why the likes of the Film 4 thing back in the day, they were tactical. They were ways that we could get a foot in the live action door where people didn't feel like, but why is this designer directing my spot? It was more like, because it was such a technique driven thing.
Yeah.
So I'd like to continue. Ideally, we just continue to not necessarily grow. We probably naturally will grow slightly, but there's definitely a breaking point. And our current model is 25-ish people is the breaking point of any one studio, because we just feel like we can maintain our like honest, simple culture with that number of people. So if we do open a third studio, if LA is like just running a dream with 25, we probably will look to a third studio somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
But, in 5-10 years, hopefully just we just want to be like, I think the future is one-stop creative shops. I think people are starting to see, trying to spread their money further, budgets are going down, blah, blah, blah. But that's not a bad thing for people like us, because we are a one-stop shop. So the important thing is for people to see that we're thinkers who also make. And that's what a lot of people think, we're just makers.
Yeah.
But we're actually very adept in that side. So if both the making and the thinking of the company can be seen in the same lights. So if we can get to a point where we're seen as like some of the best makers in the industry, but also some of the best thinkers in the industry, then I'd be so pleased with that. And people see that, you know, that's just the common acceptance of what it is.
And what if it doesn't work out?
We'll worry about that later. Right. We'll just keep doing what we're doing. All we do is we just get a project, do the project, and then move on. Honestly, that's all we do. We don't really do sales or anything like that. It's just do the work, get the work, carry on.
I think we should wrap this up.
Yeah, it's been just over an hour.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay.
I think being really sparring and also really know to pick your brain a little bit on the creative and business side as well. I think it's nice for people to try and understand a little bit how you guys
behind the magician's cloak.
Yeah, I do you know what, I like talking about the business side. As in, I don't do it a lot, but I think it's refreshing for people, because it's, to a certain degree, we're all trying to do the same thing with the same values. You know, like when I listened to the chat you had with Orion, they've got the same values as us throughout. So it's like, you don't want to just keep saying the same thing, but yeah, the fact that we are part of a larger group is one of the things that is different about us. So I'm happy to talk about that stuff. So I'm glad you asked.
It's nice to see how you guys, you know, like you just saying like it is the same principle, but both like bucket and men's versus machine is completely different in style and produce completely different things, you know, with the same values. So it's nice to see two big studios on top of the game, you know, working the same industry but producing completely different. And it comes back for me, for the point is all based on the creative, you know. It's more about the concept and the creative than how it's going to be made, you know.
Yeah, I think that what we've got in common with the likes of Buck and other really good companies is that we identify as designers before anything else. And I think I'll start up a whole new chapter if I say that. I think there's too many people currently, youngsters, who are just obsessed with getting a director credit on the reel, and they'd sooner have a director credit for a crap spot than have a lesser credit for a good spot. And I think that's that's a problem with the current generation. I think is that they're obsessed with getting that, calling themselves a director, and it's just like, it's really not important.
So one of my backup questions was like, what's an industry pet peeve? And that's definitely one of mine. Like people coming out saying they're directors, like straight out of uni. It's like, if you do that, you'll burn a lot of bridges.
I mean, it's just the way it is now, and it's just, it doesn't bother me if someone writes it down. It's just when it becomes apparent that that's all someone's bothered about, is trying to become a director just because they think that means a lot. It's like, I think there's a studio, we're friends with a bunch of like proper graphic designers called Koto, which is James Greenfield and Joey Roden, I think his name is, their studio. And Joey posted something the other day, and it was something along the lines of like, I forgot what it fucking is, the quote, but it was something along the lines of like, go far together, go fast alone. And and it was just like, yeah, exactly. Don't think you can kind of sustain something on your own for any given period, because again, we'll close it up now, but I personally went through like a big burnout about 5 years ago, where I was basically off work for a year, pretty much. And luckily I had an amazing business partner, an amazing team to just fill in for me when I was recovering.
Actually,
and if I'd have been an independent director, then I'd have been screwed.
Yeah, you'd be screwed.
I think that's quite a good topic to talk about, kind of like mental health, because it's something that's kind of ignored in the industry, and you do get a lot of burnout, because it is quite relentless, this industry. So, like how did you deal with that? I mean, obviously, you took a year out to overcome it, but like, if someone can't do that? What are some good tips to try and prevent burnout? Because I think it's quite important.
Yeah, the biggest mistake I made was ignoring it for a year. I could feel the calling, the warning signs for a year. And in my case, it was sort of like, well, it's different in everyone because it's how your body displays anxiety or stress. But for me, it was like kind of like dizziness, mind fog, lightheadedness, sort of like just not being quite present, and just general lethargy. But I ignored it. I didn't even tell my wife for about 9 months. I didn't tell anyone at work for about 12 months. And then I just hit the wall, and I was completely useless. I was just like, I didn't listen to my body. So it decided to teach me a lesson and shut me down. So I just had to like acknowledge that I wasn't capable of working at that stage. And I just had to go away and meditate my tits off and very, very, very slowly get back to a point where I could like accommodate a day's work. And it took a long time. So but the biggest mistake I made was ignoring the warning signs. So, but you don't know what they mean first time round, but I would just be like, don't be a stupid English simpleton like I was and think that your body's not trying to tell you something when it is. So just be careful, be really careful, and speak to people about it, because there is no fucking stigma. Speak to me about it if you want. But
all right, speak to you in a minute.
Yeah, exactly. But honestly, when I remember Tim saying, like, what do you want me to tell people, like, why you're not here? Should we make up an excuse, or do you want to? And I was like, no, just tell them that I'm burnt out. I've hit the wall. I need some time off, because that's what had happened. And when, instead of like making up some story or something. So, and as soon as people started getting wind of it, you won't believe the amount of people within our industry who reached out to me and said, listen, Mike, I actually went through something similar a few years ago. And what was really useful for me, there's so many people who've been through it and they've just brushed it under the carpet. And some of them have worked through it. And I don't know how they've done that. But
that's why I think it's, when you mention it, I think that's why it's important to talk about it. Because not enough people talk about it within this industry. So
and I still have to manage it to this day. It's not gone away. It's something that is like part of me now, and I have to manage my own mental health, basically.
So you have, I remember a while ago you talking about meditation. So I guess you stick to some kind of meditation routine throughout the day, kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, not really. you do the classic thing where when you feel fine, you stop doing it altogether, and then it creeps up on you again when you're like super busy, and then you have to be like, okay, I have to get back into like a sustainable routine. Just don't ask too much of yourself. Like meditation's a good way of doing it. And there's all sorts of different things you can do, and some of them you don't understand how they're helping, but for me they really did. Like cranial osteopathy was massive for me, and I have no idea how it works, but it was like this lady Liz basically taught me to relax. She figured that I just never relaxed in my entire life. I didn't understand the concept of relaxing because I probably never had ever. Yeah, so she tried to teach me. She tried to teach me what it feels like to be relaxed.
I guess people think they're relaxed, you know, when you hang out at home, chill on the couch, but I guess it's probably not the same as, because it's like your point earlier, you don't know until you know, kind of thing.
Oh yeah, yeah. The people who live the longest are the ones who have just got that kind of contentment running through them, and they're just like, you know, they don't take in anything too personally or like carry too much weight at any time. They're the lucky ones. But then to sort of, it's not like, but if I wasn't the sort of like ultra competitive, ruthless knobhead that I am, I probably wouldn't have got to the point we're at with Man vs Machine.
So it's your own fault.
It's all my own fault. It's my brain, and I'll do what I like with it.
All right.
All right, let's go.
That's a good note to end on, anyway. I think.
Yeah, I think it's a good way to end.
So huge thanks for joining us, and massive thanks to Mike for chatting to us.
Yeah, amazing inspiration as well, man, and good advices there. I think people will appreciate that.
Yeah, definitely.
My pleasure.
All right.
Thank you, guys.
This is us signing off. Join us next Tuesday, where we'll have Picnic Studio.
Yeah.
We'll put more on our Twitter and Instagram tomorrow or Thursday.
And we'll try and make the URL work.
Yeah, we'll get the URL working. All right. So, thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, man. Thank you. See ya.
Bye-bye.